Hello. Hello, and good afternoon, and welcome to Platform. As most of you know, Platform is the lecture series of Bergen Kunsthal. And for this autumn, we have relocated from the Kunsthal to the Bergen Public Library for the whole of the Platform series this autumn. And of course today there's a double reason to be here at the library, because not only for this talk but also the exhibition project that we are presenting is taking place at the public library. Yeah, and the exhibition that we are opening tonight, it's by Gabriel Kuri. His first solo exhibition in Norway. Taking place, especially made for Bergen Kunsthal and for the public library in Bergen as a public art project. Just very shortly tell you a little bit about what it consists of. It's Gabriel is presenting 8 new mobile sculptures. That means that the sculptures are equipped with wheels. And that they can move around in the library in the course of the exhibition period. It's a series, as I said, of 8 sculptures, but it comes in pairs, so there's 4 different pairs of sculptures, all taking the point of departure in certain characteristic qualities of the library as a place and institution and system. And the pairs are also quite distinct, differently in qualities in terms of their size and speciality and solidity and so on. You will soon be able to see these pieces, because immediately after this talk we will officially open the exhibition, so that's taking place 2 floors up in the 2nd floor of the library. And we will have a short opening speech to mark the official opening of the exhibition up there. So please join us further up afterwards. Now I will very soon leave the microphone to Gabriel. He will first be presenting a little bit of background by talking a bit about a few recent projects. And then I will join him again, and we will talk a little bit about this project that you will see here tonight. Yeah, I think that's it. So please welcome Gabriel.
Hello. Hello, hello. Thank you, Steinar. I'm very pleased to be here. I've enjoyed everything about this project. Thank you, Solveig, for having invited me. And thank you everyone at the Kunsthal for being so welcoming and so helpful. I am going to begin this talk by introducing you to a series of projects that I've done lately. I'm going to bombard you with a lot of images. I really won't say too much about them because I think there are enough images there. I wanted to put my work in this case in context, and for this I decided to present a series of views of exhibitions I've been having recently. I'm a sculptor, but I'm very emphatic about the situational locus of sculpture. So whether I work in a public situation, in a public space like now, or in the more enclosed and protected space of a commercial gallery, I always try to think that I can approach the place purposefully. And I'm going to, as I said, go through a few recent projects, and then also, just into other images of my sculptures, more singled out, so you can also see the kind of gestures that I conform my work with. First, we will see some images of an exhibition I recently had in Mexico, in the gallery I work with over there. That little dot that you see there, I wanted to think of that as the welcoming or the introduction to the exhibition. So that was somehow like an invitation and also a little bit of a deception, because there was a wall normally where you would find an open plan, and there was this little bit sticking out that if you got a little closer, you saw something like, yeah, like this, like when your shirt sticks out of your fly or something. And then as you turned around, you realized this was a vortex of fabric that in fact belonged to this very big print. It's like a 3D rendering of a flat surface of a text, and that somehow started or set the tone for the exhibition. That had to do with a number of things, amongst them, material paradoxes of visibility, invisibility, flatness, volume, etc. So as I said, I'm going to give you some exhibition views and maybe comment on a couple of things. As I said, this happened this year. I work with a variety of media, and by this I do not mean that I do everything or I'm trying out everything. There are things that I have steered clear of. I've never made a moving image, for instance. I've never made a video. I am essentially a sculptor, but I'd like to think that each project, each piece, in fact, demands a different execution. And I try to be rigorous with my ideas, but remain open to how to execute them. For instance, this is a light box where things have been placed inside the light box in an effort to reverse the inside and the outside space. There are lots of taxonomies in my work. I work a lot with existing objects, and I also forge and cast my own objects. And very often they mix in these taxonomies I'm talking about. So here we see, for instance, bits of soap that have been used and rubbed into these little bits. Or the door stoppers, yeah, those wedges that you find underneath doors. All of these things for me bear, of course, a sculptural cipher. So it's important for me to juxtapose them in order to make the audience somehow involved in the material, in the tactile aspect of the work. This exhibition in particular was one with a lot of different aspects. I had not exhibited in Mexico, which is where I'm from, for 5 years, and I thought I wanted to present myself somehow in a very complete way, hinting at all the different aspects and all the different models that I had been trying out those 5 years. So, there were pieces that were made with, resin and cigarette butts. There were others that were just found objects, but in a sense, there were lots of of lines. The image that we chose for this project, when we first decided that it was going to be in a public library, I didn't exactly know what I was going to do, but I thought this image would be a good way into it. And maybe as I described the very first work I started with, I thought this was also like an invitation and a deception at the same time. These filing cabinets are normally pieces of useful furniture that store information, and in this case, quite the opposite. That they have been weatherproofed and blinded and impeded, but probably heightened in their form or in their sculptural possibility. I did a similar thing with a photocopying machine. There, I had a rock hanging seamlessly on the wall. Here I go to a different exhibition, also in a gallery. And again, as I said, I work with existing things, but also things that I make in my own, in my studio. Lately, I've been working with shifts of scale, a little bit more than before. But I think one constant thing is that my preoccupation with the order of things, trying to establish orders and taxonomies, is always something important. I do a lot of my work on the road, in train stations and airports, and inevitably public toilets. Most of which I actually quite like. I don't have any kind of scatological fetish, but I like the very sturdy functional furniture, like these paper dispensers. And one day, I thought I was going to include them in a work. In fact, I was asked, just as an anecdotal little hint, I was asked to nominate the seven wonders of the modern world, already like 15 years ago. And one of them was paper towel dispensers in public toilets. I really didn't know they would somehow make it into my work. These pieces are made with insulating material. I often work with, as I said, things that I find, but also materials that are available and that are inexpensive. And I like to think that I can make something out of nothing. On the other hand, I also do not close myself to this as a kind of as a dogma. And sometimes I'm happy to work with more industrial processes, like, of course, these discs, which are quite large, are cut by laser and painted with an industrial technique. But I would like to think that my work still remains well within an ethics and a vocabulary of forms, and doesn't really steer away in wild ways. In this work, for instance, you can see, there's a piece of linoleum that waves around like this, a platform that I devised, then this resin figure, which I had built, I had made by a prop maker, and then two rubbish bins that I found. So I think this kind of summarizes a little bit how I approach sculpture. With my sculpture, I just want to give my version of the world around me. And of course, this is composed by things coming to me and things also coming from me. And I guess this piece is a patent of that. And then there are a lot of small details that I think are very important in my work, all these subtleties, the little dots and the little wedges and the little spaces in between, that I would like the audience to connect, because I think they are very important. Here I go to a project in a public institution. This is the South London Gallery, and this happened pretty much a year ago. It's a project that I called Before Contingency, After the Fact, and it was a phrase that suggested circularity, so before contingency, after the fact, before contingency, after the fact. And again, like I have described a couple of my pieces, there's a certain possibility and a certain deception that are like polar forces that work with each other and against each other. And I think that's often the paradox that that permit a lot of my works to come to life. Here we see this work on the left, which is this large dystopic arrangement of materials. Then we see some sculptures punctuating on the right. Then the screen that you see at the back is a scaffolding screen, just like you see on the facade of buildings when they're being renovated, except this is inside. And then that opened up into the patio and into another space. I was invited to do a project, mainly in this big gallery, and I negotiated with the director to extend my project up into the patio and out into a little multi-purpose space in order to really make the possibilities of sculpture really explode beyond the boundaries of the gallery. And we had a long and sometimes a little bit difficult, but always interesting discussion, because of course, once you break away from these walls, there are all sorts of implications that are not just notional, but also practical. Of course, opening up, this screen and these doors onto the patio meant, the inside and the outside temperature also were an issue, and etc. So, all of this is to say, when I work in a place, I really like to engage with the place. Sometimes there are more possibilities, and sometimes spaces are more straightforward, but I would like to think that my work really punctuates the specificity of the place. Some of my works can be seen in a more classical sculptural fashion. You have shapes and angles and colors and volumes. This is an outdoor work that I made trying to respond to what was around. Suddenly you break away from the walls of the gallery, and a lot of incidents that you have no control of come into play. And then there was this little studio next door where I made this, what I called a prototype polling station. You have seen this form of the table with the dividers earlier in the pictures of the show in Mexico. This inevitably came back now in the library. I saw these devices that demarcate space and that squeeze and expand space in the library shelves. And for me, they really were not just banal and practical, but they actually mean more than that. Today I was walking around with Steiner, and there is one bookshelf in the ground floor, in the very nice and warm classical part of the library, and it's an empty bookshelf that has little letters signaling the alphabetical order, and it has this kind of random arrangement of bookends, but it has no books. And I thought it was beautiful. It somehow did exactly what I want with my project. It spoke to me more about sculpture than about anything else. It was indexing space somehow. And in a sense, the presence of information, the presence of the books is there without really having to have them. So I guess I can also say at this point that how we, and I very rarely use the word we, but we as a society assign function to material, and how we organize material, and how we organize ourselves around material, and how, in a sense, also material organizes us. All these dynamics are very important in my work. I don't want my sculpture to just lie there in a passive way. Sometimes there is more interaction from the public, sometimes there is less. But even when the audience is not allowed to touch the work, which is of course a lot of the times, I would like there to be an involvement, touching, let's say, and participating, even if it's in a hypothetical way. I would like this to be very emphatic. This is an image of the Venice Biennale. I am not sure whether some of you might have been there. I had a room in which I made this environment with different works. This, for instance, is a bamboo cane that touched the floor and the ceiling, and in the middle had a squeezed can of Coca-Cola Zero. And then there were these two very big rocks that were very heavy, of course, that were embedded or hanging on the wall with three pairs of socks in a ball. And again, a little balance of objects. This is a form of self-portraiture that I might go into a little later. And then I'm just going to go into certain other pieces I've made over the years. This is a very early work. It's a still life. You know, as you see in this work, and you might have gathered with others, in a certain way, my sculpture can be seen, you know, under classical parameters. You know, I'm okay with that. I think that pushing those boundaries there's still a lot of room for new things to be said. In this case, I wrapped 3 avocados with newspaper from the day of the moon landing. That was July 21st, 1969. This is a work that is made with sheets of the financial newspaper of the day, which are sandwiched between layers of damp moss, or vice versa, damp moss being sandwiched with damp sheets of the financial newspaper. And then again, there is this formation. As you see, you know, formations, arrangements, these almost didactic alignments of objects are important in my work. I also make collages. And I would like to think that the gestures that I employ in collage are pretty similar to the ones I use in my sculpture. You will see tickets also in this project in the library. Here I used parking tickets and turn tickets from, these were turn tickets from where you're standing in line in a municipal office or a bank. That's one of those, but it's somehow exploded into these 5 bits. This is another museum exhibition view. In this project in the library, there's also works that are materially quite contrasting, but it's important for me to consider them, you know, as one group that then spreads out into units and is hopefully still able to retain some material coherence. But as you see, my sculpture can have many materials and shapes. This is a project that, you know, I think is significant in the origin of what I did here in the library. This was the Berlin Biennale of 2008, and I was fortunate enough to be invited to the Neue National Gallery, which is this very beautiful, emblematic modernist building of Mies van der Rohe. You see on the side there is this plywood unit, which is what the architect himself designed as a coat check, where people, you know, that went to a function would leave their jacket or their purse. So my sculpture started with emptying out the function from these two. There was one on one side and one on the other. Emptying out the function and bringing it into the center of the gallery. So something that is normally in the periphery, I wanted to bring into the center. So I made these sculptures pretty much in the fashion of public sculpture, very, very robust, monochrome painted metal sculptures. And then people who wanted to leave their jacket or their bag were invited to leave it on the sculpture. So it was a collective work that, you know, in the morning, this is what what the piece looked like in the morning. and then it started to fill with people's codes. People got a little disc with a number that was matched with a disc of the same number that was stuck with a magnet to each one of the pieces. So in fact, it was a service that was functional, and as I said, worked as a collaborative work, and it was somehow a little unpredictable for me to foresee what shapes it would take. There were a number of rules, in a sense, that I devised from the beginning, but they were open enough that different things could happen formally. And sometimes there was a big group of people who came all at the same time, so there was a bundle of jumpers on top of the sculpture with just one little disc. And then when they went, you had this whole bundle that disappeared suddenly. So there were all sorts of things happening visually and physically to these works. This is an earlier work, which I think also has a little bit that spirit. This tree I found in Mexico City right next to a bus stop, and people who are waiting for the bus, they stick their chewing gum. And I don't know who started it, but it became this automatic collective exercise. So it's continuing now. It probably has a lot more pieces of chewing gum. This is a detail of a piece I did in the Kunstverein Freiburg. And although it may seem, again, like a collective work, this is actually very carefully done by me. And then there's the invitation to people who wanted to leave a donation for the museum. There's normally a little perspex box in the entrance where people, leave a donation for the Kunstverein to actually throw it on this plane of sand, somehow like you would in a fountain. This is again a work that involved participation. I made these metal sculptures, and they were placed right at the door of an art fair tent at the Frieze Art Fair, where lots and lots and lots of people actually had to go through, and where I knew most people would take, the last draw of their cigarette and extinguish it. So I put the sculptures there, and it only took a couple of people to do that, and then others followed. And as I said, there were a certain set of rules that were important to state from the beginning. This is the kind of piece that is, of course, participatory, but I don't like an anarchic invitation to whatever might happen. And I think one of the first rules is, in fact, the form, the shape. If I devise a shape that already has certain crevices or certain curves or, certain spaces between the two plaques, I think that's already an invitation to a certain sculptural gesture. I observe in daily life how these things are spontaneously done. If you look around you, you will see how, you put your jacket on top of the seat, or, how things kind of fall into place, or sometimes we really are conscious about, sometimes not, but all these sculptural gestures by which we negotiate space and we negotiate material in space are very important for me. Again, classifications. Another exhibition view. This is a piece I did at Esther Schipper Gallery in 2007. And again, it was a bamboo cane that reached from the ceiling to the floor. It was somehow a piece that you could look upside down and downside up. And I somehow wanted to begin the piece in the middle of the space and then work my way down and work my way up as well. It was because Esther no longer has her gallery there, but it was an unusually high space for its floor plan. So it was really a challenge to deal with the height of the space. And I thought the way to tackle it would be to cut it in half. So that's when I decided to make this piece. It was called An Immediate Indexation of Possibilities as a Consummation of All Desire. And we have, some more collages and these tapestries that I have woven after tickets of my consumptions. I think this is also a little hint to one of the works that we will find here in the library. In this column, I call this a column, I scoured through the receipts for approximately a year or a year and a half of consumption. They're all chronologically arranged. And on the straight rod, there are all these receipts, like proofs of purchase. On the curved rod, there are an alphabetical order of all the tickets that I obtained while I was waiting. So somehow you have the juxtaposition of two different orders. The chronological and the alphabetical, both of which you can think of being correct or absurd. It depends on what you want from them. This one I already talked a little bit about. This one's called Two Arrested Clouds. No, Three Arrested Clouds. Yeah, 1, 2, 3. It's a roll of tickets and 3 rocks. And I did it in Bolzano, which is a place that has very pronounced and very present mountains, just like Bergen. I like Bergen because the mountains are right there. And I miss mountains. I live in Brussels at the moment, and there are no mountains there. And I cannot think of that as in any other way but a poverty of landscape. At the Kunstverein in Freiburg, I went around the whole railing of a balcony. It's a balcony not too different to the one you have here, and put these bird spikes. And then again, similar to what I did in the column, I scoured through all the receipts for a very long period. So it was like an inventory of all my activity. This is another landscape work, I guess. And as you might gather by now, I'm interested in the geometric language of the display of information, like charts and graphs. And orders. That's a view of my studio. That is an aluminum blanket. And again, I think of these pieces as a form of self-portraiture, but a form of self-portraiture as a chart. So if I were to draw myself, in a very graphic way, let's say, and summarize myself, my body maybe as the locus of a series of lines of flow and connection and relation, this would be what it would summarize as. Here I stuck some euro banknotes, and you could only see the little bit with the hologram. And again, I think you can see these works as formalistic, or let's say in their classical, more collages, more of these. There was a word that became very important while I was preparing the project here in the library, and this was the ecology. I thought that coming into a library was going to confront me with something that I love already, which is all the organizing principles, all the indexing, and all these norms of ordering. And sure enough, I found that, but there was something else that suddenly became very, very present and very important, and it was the ecology of the library. How so much work has to be put into keeping the place alive. I suddenly started looking at the amount of waste that it generated and the amount of space that had to be freed in order to bring in more elements. I learned, for instance, that 20,000 books are thrown away every year, which was shocking. But then they told me, how do you expect 20,000 new books to come in if we don't, free some space? And this was one of the main facts that made me really think of the library as a public place where an ecology is really crucial. Because as we know, new technologies come in and old technologies become obsolete, and then books take a lot of space, and a lot of thought has to be put into how to keep this public place relevant and practically alive. So I work with materials of waste sometimes, like wrapping material. These sculptures were wrapped with bubble wrap, and then that became part of the piece. Here, there's water in these segments. Anyway, I think I've shown you so many things. You might be dizzy by now, but I just thought it might be the one chance I have of talking to a lot of you. So I wanted to really soak you in the kind of world that I find myself. And hopefully, give a rich enough ground so that you can see the project up there in the library with enough baggage. And now, Steiner and I are going to briefly talk about the project or what led to the project you will see upstairs. If you want to ask some questions, maybe we do them at the end after we... Yeah. Okay. Thanks for your attention.
Yes, thank you so much for that presentation. It's very nice to see all of those images in a row like that, and I think it will give all of you a very nice backdrop to what we will see afterwards. But because even though the pieces and the project that we are showing here are very sort of specifically developed for the library and relates both in terms of material and shapes and ideas, it relates a lot to the library. You will all see a lot of recurring elements from your previous works. Also, again, in terms of material and objects and even shapes and forms. But I wanted maybe to begin by asking, or to maybe tell you a little bit about how we approached Gabriel in the first place. When Solveig, director of the Bergenkunsthal, and myself were discussing how we wanted to approach doing projects outside of the Kunsthal this autumn, we decided that we didn't really want to put too much specific curatorial framework from the start to invite artists to say we want this in this project for this in this space, but really make a very open invitation to artists that we were interested in. And so the basically an invitation you got was as open as, do you want to work with us for a project sometime this autumn, someplace in Bergen? And then the idea was to start from the actual practice and your way of working, and discussing and finding a context and a space that would be interesting to put in a dialogue with your work. And then after some discussions and looking at some ideas for specific spaces, we pretty quickly ended up with the library as the first choice. And so now my question, if you could tell us a little bit about what attracted you to the library as a site for this project.
Well, I think I could briefly say that on the one hand, there was a possibility of transporting the Kunsthal to a place that was empty, not just physically empty, but also empty of function. There was mention of a very nice place that had formerly been a prison and was abandoned at the moment. And sure enough, it had a lot of atmosphere. And on the other hand, there was a possibility, of course, of occupying a public space that was not just full physically, but also full of function. And after some reflection, I realized that for me, the idea of occupying an empty space with bringing the epistemology of the Kunstallen into an empty place was less of a challenge than trying to somehow squat a public place that has a function and has a public, a rhythm already, as that would most probably make me ask myself more interesting questions about sculpture. Of course, once we broke away from the walls of the Kunsthalle, suddenly the idea of doing a project in a public place became interesting. I don't really do many projects in public spaces. And when the right one is offered to me, I think it's a very necessary and very healthy challenge, because inevitably I have to ask myself things that I sometimes forget to ask myself if I'm showing in a gallery or even in an art institution, in which it's much more predictable. The situations that arise with the audience and etc. are a little bit more predictable. So then suddenly I thought, the library is a place where there are a lot of things happening, a lot of people going in and out, and there's also even art on the walls. So can I really make a project in which I involve my vocabulary and my modus and make sense in a place like this? So this is when the library became attractive.
Yes, as you said, the library is already filled with stuff and functions, and also, as you said, with art. And so one of the challenges that we had when we first, or one of the things that we encountered when we first actually started looking at the physical space was, of course, how to engage with the space without making it into an exhibition space and showing works that could be shown in any other place, like cleaning up some walls or making too much sort of interfering with what was already in the library, which could be one solution to clear out the space or to ask for permission to make this area available for display of objects. But then I think that the key moment, I guess, was the idea of the mobiles.
Yes, of the rolling units. As you may have gathered now, but by what you've heard, clearing out a space and making a little exhibition didn't really seem like a very interesting thing to do. I wanted to tap into the activity somehow of the library, and after spending 3 days in a prospection trip in the summer, I really fell in love with these rolling shelves, because they were like the rolling soul somehow of the library. They're little temporary orders in their own right, and they're rolling around, performing the function of distributing the books back to the books and other materials back to where they go. And I suddenly realized I wouldn't have thought of it before, but one of the elements that interests me the most in the library is actually this ambulant thing, this moving target. And then I thought, this is the kind of quality that I need for my sculptures. I need them to move around, and I need them to engage spatially and conceptually with different things, go from one environment to the next. And this moment in which I realized the sculptures or the pieces, I don't know whether to call them sculptures or pieces, but where the pieces should be mobile, other questions actually came into place, and that's really when it started to become interesting and fun.
Maybe you could describe. I mean, this is a bit difficult since most of you have not seen the sculptures yet, but will very soon. But just as I said in my introduction as well, the series of pieces consists of pairs, and maybe if you could describe one pair, for example, the bookends, it will.
Yeah, one of the things that this mobile quality that shed light on this. One of the things that this mobile quality shed light on was the fact that suddenly I could either have one, or I could have two, or I could have three, and this became a significant question. There were these demarcators of space that we call, as a working title or as a nickname, they are the giant bookends, which you can think of as, if they move close to each other, they're squeezing the space between them, and if they move far apart, they are expanding the space. And of course, this is something that you can only do if there are two. And then I started to think of that same, idea of having a pair for the other works. And the fact that they might find themselves at a certain point, or the fact that they might, the audience might be walking around and see one of the two, and then see another one in a different place. And I think in this game of associations is really when things start, when the problems start becoming active. So the rolling and the two, there are things that didn't occur to me in the beginning, but as I was discussing with Steiner in the email and everything and making drawings, suddenly they became significant. I think it's also important that we say at the moment that we will mark the beginning of the project with actually rolling the pieces from the station to which they come to at the end of each day, and from which they start from in the beginning of each day. We're going to roll them out right now. It's important to think of the timing, of the temporality, of the duration as a significant aspect of sculpture. And in fact, in this piece, is really patent. Every day, all the sculptures will come back to this one place, just like the rolling shelves come back to their, to their place. And then every morning they will go out again. Every day the pieces will be found in different places. So the audience that comes to see the project is going to have to find the pieces. It was important for me that they engaged in going up and down and in and out, and from one kind of an environment to another one, just like I did when I was looking around the library trying to make sense of it. And maybe this is a moment also, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. We can also keep talking as we go up, and we see the works, and we begin rolling them out.
I know we don't have much time, so I'll be very quick. Thank you, Gabriel, and thank you, Steiner. I just have a question about this duality in your sculptures, whereas they are formal sculptures, autonomous sculptures in a way, but at the same time they also entail this very relational kind of energy. And I guess that's also why they function to tap into the activity in a library as this, and also what was possible to do in South London Gallery. We actually showed work inside the gallery, but they were also commenting on the near context around the South London Gallery. Wasn't that? There was some investigation you had done with the social community around the South London Gallery. So I was wondering if you could just tell us a little bit more about that kind of opposite things in your sculptures, but also that makes a very nice entity.
Well, I guess you said it, and thank you for that. But sometimes a question like this, I have a way out, and I say, I studied in London. I went to Goldsmiths College, and there it was all about dialectical opposites. So that's how I was formed. But I think, yes, in my work there is a constant tension between dialectical opposites. I cannot completely free my work from being information. The work is informed by a series of conditions that I invest into it, but also they are socially invested. I can never free the work from that. It can never be just material. It can never be just shape. There is information. There is the social. And on the other hand, it cannot be just information. I'm not a conceptual artist either. My language is the language of form, but of course, form is always informed. And I think this tension is what somehow I would like to think that makes the work live, that keeps the work alive. And often I have to deal with certain contextual issues in a more direct way, like it happened with South London Gallery, and sometimes a little less. But I think probably because the work has this openness, is that I might be able to remain within the language of sculpture, but to adapt to different contexts and different situations. Anyone else? Yes?
You often make pieces on site.
Uh-huh.
You often make pieces or works on site. You actually make it in the gallery space, or
I do. Yes, I do. The way that I work these days, I travel a lot. I make a lot of projects, and I have a family, and I don't have 2 years to think of a project. But I always like to leave something to be resolved on site. So very often I will arrive to a gallery or to wherever with already certain elements that I know are going to be my basis. And then hopefully something happens that I incorporate something that I found in the street or in the patio or whatnot. And that very often is what makes the whole project click. I like to remain a little open for improvisation. There's also something about the lightness of touch in a lot of the sculptural gestures that are significant to me. That, as I said, you just have to look around and you find them everywhere. That I would like my work to still be imbued with. I don't want my work to feel very choreographed, like it was made in a CAD program and I just saw exactly how it should look and it's transported like that. I like to think that there would be still some lightness of touch, and that might even be the key into the project. Okay, well, we are very punctual, in fact.
Yeah.
Thank you again for your attention.